So 12.8 goes over a multiplication of binomials containing radicals. When we multiply with these, if there's something out front of the radical, those terms will multiply together, and then anything inside the radical, as long as it's the same index, will multiply together. If we look at example 1a, we have the square root of 3 times 4 square root 2 minus 3. We're going to distribute this square root 3 into the set of parentheses. So we're going to do the square root of 3 times 4 square root 2, which gives us 4 square root 6, and the square root of 3 times negative 3, which is negative 3 square root 3. You cannot do anything else with this. It doesn't simplify, so you leave it as it is. For example B, we have the square root of 6 times 5 square root 2 minus 6 square root 3. When we distribute this in, this is going to give us 5 square root 12 minus 6 square root 18. We do need to simplify this. That 12 is 4 times 3. The 4 is 2 times 2, so those 2's will pair up. We have 5 times 2 square root 3. The 18 is 3 times 6. 6 is 3 times 2. Those 3's pair up, so we're going to do negative 6 times 3 square root 2. When we multiply these, we're left with 10 square root 3 minus 18 square root 2. For example C, we have 5 square root 2 times 3 square root 3 plus 8 square root 2. Now when I do this, I'm going to do this one a little differently than I did the ones before this. I still am going to distribute that 5 square root 2 in. However, I'm going to rewrite it as 5 times 3, which is 15, square root 2 times 3. The 5 times 8 gives us 40. And then we have the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which is just the square root of 2 times 2. When we simplify this, we see that these two 2's are going to pair up to get rid of that radical. And we're just going to do 15 square root 6 plus 40 times 2. That 40 times 2 is 80, so our final answer for this is 15 square root 6 plus 80. For example D, we have 2 square root 7 times 8 square root 5 plus 4 square root 11. So I see that all of my numbers underneath these radicals are prime numbers. So I'm just going to distribute that 2 square root 7 in. We're going to have 16 square root 35 plus 8 square root 77. For our next section, we're going to be working with binomials times binomials. With these, they are special cases involved with some of these, so you got to make sure that you're paying attention to the terms that are inside each set of these parentheses. For example, 2a, we have 6 plus the square root of 11 times 6 minus the square root of 11. Your a here for both of these is 6. Your b for both of these is the square root of 11. You have opposite signs here, so this is a difference of squares. So we can take the 6 and square it minus the square root of 11 squared. The 6 squared is 36 minus the square root of 11 squared is just 11. So 36 minus 11 is 25. So if you don't realize that you have a difference of squares when you look at your original problem, you can just FOIL these out. If we look at example B, I see that that's a difference of squares because my a term in both sets of parentheses is that 8 square root 7. My b term is in both sets of parentheses is 12, and there are different signs between the two for each set. However, if I want to, I can just FOIL it out. So if I do that 8 square root 7 times 8 square root 7, I have 64 square root 7 times 7. The 8 square root 7 times 12 is going to give us 96 square root 7. Then I have the negative 12 times 8 square root 7, which is going to be negative 96 square root 7. And then the negative 12 times 12 is negative 144. I see here that those 96 square root 7 and the negative 96 square root 7 are opposite, so they're going to cancel each other out. That 7 times 7 underneath the first radical is just going to be giving us 64 times 7, and then we have that minus 144. The 64 times 7 gives us 448. We subtract 144 from that, and we get 304 for our final answer. For example C, we have 3 square root 2 plus 5 times the square root of 5 minus 3 square root 2. If we FOIL this, we're going to do the 3 square root 2 times the square root of 5, which gives us 3 square root 10. The 3 square root 2 times the negative 3 square root 2 gives us a negative 9 square root 4. 5 times the square root of 5 is 5 square root 5. And 5 times the negative 3 square root 2 is negative 15 square root 2. We can simplify that 9 square root 4. We're going to have 3 square root 10 minus 9 times 2 plus 5 square root 5 minus 15 square root 2. The 9 times 2 gives us a negative 18, so we have 3 square root 10 minus 18 plus 5 square root 5 minus 15 square root 2. You do not have any like terms that you can combine here, so we're going to leave it in this form, and that is your answer. For example D, we have 9 square root 2 plus 8 square root 5 times 3 square root 3 plus 6 square root 2. So again, we're just going to FOIL this. 9 square root 2 times 3 square root 3 is going to give us 27 square root 6. 9 square root 2 times 6 square root 2 is 54 square root 4. 8 square root 5 times 3 square root 3 is positive 24 square root 15. Then we have that 8 square root 5 times 6 square root 2, which is 48 square root 10. We want to simplify that square root of 4, so it's going to be 27 square root 6 plus 54 times 2 plus 24 square root 15 plus 48 square root 10. The 54 times 2 gives us a final answer of 27 square root 6 plus 108 plus 24 square root 15 plus 48 square root 10. For our next set of examples, we have binomials squared. So you can use your formula when we have these binomials squared. If we have a plus sign between those two terms, we can do your a squared plus 2 times a times b plus b squared. If you have a negative in between those two terms, you can do your a squared minus 2 times a times b plus b squared. If not, and you want to expand these, take the binomial, multiply it by itself, and FOIL. If we look at example A, we have 3 plus 5 squared. That 3 plus 5 squared, your a is the 3, your b is the square root of 5. There's addition between the two, so we're going to do 3 squared plus 2 times 3 times the square root of 5 plus the square root of 5 squared. The 3 squared gives us 9. 2 times 3 is 6, square root 5, and then the square root of 5 squared is just 5. We combine our like terms. 9 plus 5 is 14 plus 6 square root 5. For example B, we have 2 square root 3 minus 5 square root 7 squared. So again, our a is the first term, which is that 2 square root 3. Our b is that 5 square root 7. We have a negative between them. So we're going to do 2 square root 3 squared minus 2 times 2 square root 3 times 5 square root 7 plus 5 square root 7 squared. The 2 square root 3 squared, it's going to cancel out the radical, but the 2 is going to be squared, so we have 4 times 3. The negative 2 times 2 square root 3 is negative 4 square root 3 times 5 square root 7 is going to give us a negative 20 square root 21. And 5 square root 7 squared gives us 25 times 7. The 4 times 3 gives us 12, minus 20, square root 21. The 25 times 7 gives us 175. We combine our like terms, which is the 12 and the 175, to get 187 minus 20, square root 21. So if you do not want to use these methods, I'm going to do example C by expanding it and just foiling it. So if we have 5 minus the square root of 3 squared, it's the same thing as 5 minus the square root of 3 times 5 minus the square root of 3. We're going to FOIL these, so 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times negative square root of 3 is negative square root 3, negative 5 square root 3. Negative square root 3 times 5 is negative 5 square root 3. Negative square root 3 times negative square root 3 is a positive square root 9. To simplify, we have 25 minus 10 square root 3 plus 3, which then further simplifies to be 28 minus 10 square root 3. For example D, we have 3 square root 13 minus 6 square root 2 squared. I'm going to do this one the same way I did the one before it. So I'm just going to expand it to be 3 square root 13 minus 6 square root 2 times 3 square root 13 minus 6 square root 2. I FOIL this out, so 3 times 3 gives us 9. Square root of 13 times the square root of 13 is the square root of 169. 3 square root 13 times negative 6 square root 2 is negative 18 square root 26. Negative 6 square root 2 times 3 square root 13 is negative 18 square root 26. Negative 6 square root 2 times negative 6 square root 2 is positive 36 square root 4. From here, we just simplify, so that's going to be 9 times 13 minus 36 square root 26 plus 36 times 2. The 9 times 13 is 117. Oops. The 36 times 2 is 72. If we add the 117 with the 72, it gives us 189 minus 36 square root 26. The last part of our lesson deals with rationalizing denominators that involve these binomials with radicals attached to them. So, hold on one second, there we go. With these, okay, so for example A, we have 3 over 5 minus 2 square root 7. You're going to take the conjugate of the binomial in the denominator. So you're going to keep the two terms, but change the sign between them. So this 5 minus 2 square root 7, we're going to keep the 5. We're going to keep the 2 square root 7. The sign we started with was subtraction, so we're going to put addition between the two. What we do to the bottom, we do to the top as well. So we'll multiply the top by 5 plus 2 square root 7 also. If we distribute in, the 3 times 5 is 15. The 3 times 2 square root 7 is 6 square root 7. On the bottom, I have a difference of squares, so it's going to be 5 squared minus 2 square root 7 squared. The 5 plus 6 square root 7 I can't do anything with, so I'm just going to rewrite it up top. The 5 squared is 25. The 2 square root 7 squared gives us 4 times 7. The 4 times 7 is 28. So if we combine these, we have 15 plus 6 square root 7 over negative 3. We don't ever leave a negative in the denominator, so we're going to change these signs up. And we're going to have negative 15 minus 6 square root 7 all over 3. We can simplify this because all of those terms are divisible by 3. The 15 is going to become a negative 5. The negative 6 becomes a negative 2. The 3 becomes a 1. So this is just negative 5 minus 2 square root 7. For example B, we have 8 over the square root of 3 plus 4. So we're going to use the denominator and find the conjugate of it, which is the square root of 3 minus 4. We multiply the top and the bottom by that. The 8 times the square root of 3 is 8 square root 3. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. On the bottom, we're going to have the square root of 3 squared minus 4 squared. This is going to simplify to be 8 square root 3 minus 32 over 3 minus 16. The 3 minus 16 gives us negative 13, so that's 8 square root 3 minus 32 over negative 13. We change the signs on these, so this is going to be negative 8 square root 3 plus 32 all over 13. For our next example, C, we have 5 over 2 plus 3 square root 11. To find the conjugate of that denominator, we're just going to take the 2, keep the 3 square root 11, change the sign between them, and then do the same to the top and multiply the numerator and the denominator by it. So this is going to give us 5 times 2, which is 10. 5 times negative 3 square root 11 is negative 15 square root 11, all over 2 squared minus 3 square root 11 squared. So this is going to give us 10 minus 15 square root 11, all over 4 minus 9 times 11. The 9 times 11 is negative 99, so 10 minus 15 square root 11, all over 4 minus 99. We subtract the 4 and the 99. We get 10 minus 15 square root 11, all over negative 95. These are all divisible by 5. We also want to change the signs on these. So this is going to become negative 2 plus 3 square root of 11 all over 19. So this becomes negative 2 plus 3 square root of 11 all over 19. For our last example, we have 3 plus the square root of 2 over 1 minus 3 square root 2. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom of this fraction by 1 plus 3 square root 2. This is going to give us 3 plus 9 square root 2 plus the square root of 2 plus 3 square root 4 all over 1 squared minus 3 square root 2 squared. On the top, we can combine those like terms and simplify that radical. So this gives us 3 plus 10 square root 2 plus 3 times 2. On the bottom, we're going to have 1 minus 9 times 2. Next, we're going to be working with 3 plus 10 square root 2 plus 6 all over 1 minus 18. This gives us 9 plus 10 square root 2 all over negative 17. Work with your sign, change all of the signs. We have negative 9 minus 10 square root 2 all over 17.